So, this conversation is genuinely to try to understand and get the opinion of an expert who really understands that world. And you yourself have told me they're legitimate.
Yes, obviously.
So, what's going on in the world? I'm seeing more reactions to everything I mentioned, and it's growing. It will keep growing since you can't block the sun with one finger.
No, it will keep growing. And what's happening out there in the world? Yes, out there.
Now we are on the material plane.
Now we are in Malchut, in Kabbalah, that is on the material plane. So what is happening out there is what is supposed to happen. Chaos, there has to be absolute chaos. A carnival, that is, this chaos has to happen. Why? Because only by shaking the hornet's nest, by kicking the hornet's nest, do the hornets come out. Because the role of the forces of evil is to create chaos. For what purpose? So you recognize your inner chaos and bring order to your life? If we talk on a geostrategic or geopolitical level, that's a dimensional plane we can discuss, but that places us in the dimensional plane of politics, geostrategy, and economics, of, let's say, the rules of the video game in the physical plane.
Yes.
Great. That's a plane of consciousness. In spirituality, we move to a higher plane focused on what the lessons are. What can I learn from what's happening in the world and my own experiences?
All right, let's go to that plane.
And that higher plane is what I'm talking about all the time.
No, yes, I know, but with everything, I want you to analyze what's happening. What did you call it on the material plane?
Geopolitical, geostrategic.
What did you call it in Malchut?
Malchut.
Malchut. Please provide an analysis of the Malchut. I think it's important to understand the material plane. And I really like what I learned from you, because many times I give too much importance maybe to the material plane. Maybe I just need to see how I react to things that are bound to happen. But I would like an analysis of how your soul transforms, or what explanation your spirit or your spirituality gives to what is happening. In the Malchut audience, the material plane.
Malchut is fundamental. I mean, in Kabbalah, the material plane is fundamental. Because it's where the Kabbalists come. They say to gather soul sparks that have been left lost in previous lives. That is, teachings that bring us back to the plane of reincarnations. It's where in past incarnations I have left things unattended or things to resolve properly. For that, we need a scenario to be created where there are several levels of events. There are personal event levels, family events, national and international events. All right, there are several planes of events.
Yes, that way we will have exact town events.
So let's say there are several planes of events. Each of those planes generates what is known in Jungian psychology as an egregore. That is, it has its own life, so to speak. It has its own reality. As multidimensional beings, we can manage all those planes simultaneously within Malchut, as well as higher level planes that are already non-physical. That is, from our inner qualities, from kindness, from generosity, or from setting boundaries with others, whether on the psychological or spiritual plane, such as meditation or connecting with the divine. In other words, on a transcendent level, human beings have the ability to manage all those levels at once, and that's called the Tree of Life, where all of that has its own world. Malchut, which you asked about, is absolutely fundamental. In Kabbalah, it's simply called Egypt. When we read the Torah and see the stories about Egypt, which in Hebrew is called Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim comes from the Hebrew root tsar, which means narrowness. Malchut is where the soul experiences a constriction. It's inside a body, it's inside a dimension where things happen to it, and it's in a state of constriction. For what? To experience. What the Exodus from Egypt means, to where? To Israel, it's all a metaphor. When the Jewish people are chased by the Egyptians, they cross the Red Sea with Moses leading them, Moshe, and then they go from being chased by the Egyptians to finding themselves in other dimensions. That's why the Red Sea opens, the answer to be able to overcome their difficulties. It's talking about you and me, it's talking about us, it's talking about each one of us. Because our emunah, our faith, will reveal the solution before us in the physical world. Malchut, Egypt, is needed constantly in every situation to help us make decisions. Is it bad to have things in the material world? How should I know? Money, well, it's neither bad nor good. It's something neutral. It depends on what you do with it. Is a scalpel bad? Well, it depends. If it's for healing, it's very good. If it's for killing, it's bad. It's not the tool or energy itself, but how you use it, which depends on your consciousness. And your level of consciousness will depend on your studies, your depth, your self-examination, and everything you are aware of in your daily life. That is, we have to be aware that we update ourselves daily, several times in our consciousness, depending on the events and inputs we receive and how we react to them. So, it's a continuous training, it's a very tough training, and it's a training that requires constant faith and constant inner strength. And that only happens in Malchut. It would be the ring, the boxing ring.
I understand. And so what happens on the material plane? What is happening on the material plane? Epstein lists, Federal Reserve, expulsion that affects the countries and so on. Like, how can this be explained spiritually since we don't control what happens? But at the end of the day, we've had to live through a series of circumstances, and that obviously affects our spirituality, affects our actions, affects everything. At the end of the day, how do you explain the current geopolitical landscape? What advice do you give young people, Raul? And they're starting to have more and more nationalist, anti-Semitic, and other such feelings, because that's really where I'm starting to get a little scared. A possible reactionary wave that's going to be generated in Europe because the security forces, politics, and international banking are not giving answers to young people. And we've all known that in a time of crisis, in a time when young people have no purpose, in a time when young people have no way to fulfill themselves, on the material level is where frustrations come, where hatred begins, and where inevitably the world, the Malchut plane, the material plane will end up imploding.
Perfectly. Let's start from the beginning. How can geopolitical events help you? Or what is the purpose of those major geopolitical and geostrategic events that you are referring to? In the plan, they have multiple uses. The first is to help you discern, because when you observe them, if you have the ability to discern, you can realize what is happening. Exercise your ability to discern, to distinguish what is really happening. That makes you take a leap in awareness. That is to say, in that sense, they are very, very useful. Some affect you in your daily life and others don't. Some affect you more in your day-to-day, others affect you less. In what? It can affect you on a material level. Well, it affects you, for example, I remember in the last one. Bank accounts in England for Russia.
Yes, with the start of the war in nuclear.
Exactly. That's when the elites take a series of measures. And that affects the price of what? Well, of fuel. It affects your daily life just a bit. It affects you a bit because the price of gas or diesel goes up. That raises transportation and food costs. What does the Kabbalah say? It says this can affect you, but you can counteract it.
Explain it to me.
Because there is a concept in Kabbalah called Parnasa. Parnasa means sustenance. Many people associate it only with money, but money is an energy of sustenance. It's what you need to sustain yourself at this moment.
Food. It could also be food.
Food, etc.
For home.
May you never lack Parnasa. May you never lack sustenance. So Kabbalah gives us tools so that you never lack Parnasa. In such a way that you are protected if fuel prices go up or down, because you will always keep earning more and at the same rate as before. Why? Because you have imuna, you have faith, and you have the tools to generate more than what comes to you or what tries to be taken from you. I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
Yes.
That's it. On one hand, the same thing happens with geostrategic events that affect you, for example, in another aspect of your life. For example, do you want to replace a part in your car? And it turns out that the parts aren't coming because they come from China. And since there's a war with China or there's controversy with China, the semiconductors don't arrive and your car takes a month to get repaired. You have two options: make your life miserable or find an alternative to develop your potential. That is, global geostrategic events do affect you, yes, on a personal level, some more, some less. But in reality, they're part of the carnival and they affect you. Above all, in your ability to discern and sense what really matters and what really doesn't. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that happens is that we're in this world to learn about ourselves and what is shown to us on the screen. So, is that what all those geopolitical, strategic events, etc. are for?
In the end, a Kabbalist focuses everything on the spiritual plane. The material plane is there, it matters, but no.
No, what are you saying? Actually, Jota, forgive me. As a Kabbalist, you don't need to leave the material world. You exist here. Where the real action happens in the arena, the Kabbalist doesn't run away from the material. On the contrary, the Kabbalist faces the real action in the arena. Jesus boils, the Messiah boils in a cauldron of filth here in this world to face the real action.
I understand. Do you understand?
Is that a Kabbalist? The Kabbalist doesn't run away from the material world. On the contrary, what the Kabbalist does is bring the highest spiritual levels down to this world for what? To give himself spiritual strength?
I also have a question for you. I understand that there have been great wars within Judaism against the Kabbalists.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? I mean, the Kabbalists, let's say, are not well regarded by all branches of the Jewish people, not by a long shot, right? I mean, there have been persecutions, there have been some rabbis are strongly opposed to Kabbalah.
Yes.
And who are much more, let's say, about the literal world. Yes, that's where all the problems I've seen are. Then, tell me briefly about the history of the wars waged against Kabbalists.
Well, this topic is very interesting because within the Jewish people, as you know and as we talked about in the previous podcast, Erev Rav infiltrated, that is, they slipped in. Apparently Jews, but they are not. They are the ones who really rule the world. They call themselves Jews, but they are not.
They aren't, since they're not who you thought I meant before.
And so, within what is the branch, let's say, of rabbis or spiritual leaders within the Jewish people? Of course, all those who condemn the spreading of knowledge that sets you free are going to be against it. That is, among those who apparently seem to be good people and who care for their followers, let's put it that way, it's actually the complete opposite. I'm going to give you an example from during the events of 30. I closely follow a spiritual teacher, a rabbi who is very dear to me, Rabbi Alonanava. He is a very outspoken man regarding the events of 30, a rabbi with extraordinary vision and clarity. And as I said, I follow him a lot. I interviewed him. I went to Israel to interview him, and the interview is on my channel. It's pure gold. And this man tells it like it is. He says what many of us see. No, he's not afraid. He doesn't hide.
What truth is that? Well,
it was all a farce, and I won't go into details to avoid your video getting taken down, but we agree on that. And he reported it and really put himself at risk. He reported it. In Israel, there are two chief rabbis, one for Sephardic Jews and one for Ashkenazi Jews. The Ashkenazi Jews are the ones who come from Europe, from Northern Europe. Sephardic Jews are from the Sepharad region, Spain, Portugal, the Mediterranean, Morocco, etc. Those are Sephardic, right? All right, the rabbinical leaders of Israel recommended inoculation to their congregants. And with that, I'm saying everything. Thank you. There are no more questions.
So, at the end of the day, yes, also, well, many of us priests are also, the thing is that at the end of the day, we live in somewhat turbulent times. I don't want people to misinterpret my intentions when discussing controversial topics. My aim is to silence, in a sense. No, silence isn't the right word. What I intend is to contain a reactionary wave. Quite, which can end up being quite dangerous, but at the end of the day, it's still quite justified. Because at the end of the day, if we observe patterns, you realize that the leaders of the big pharmaceutical companies belong to a certain group. We also realize that if you look at Hollywood, there's absolute dominance. We go to the medical industry, it's the same. We go to the music industry, it's the same. And all these industries have the arms industry, state cabinets. At the end of the day, one might come to think that there really is complete Western dominance by these people, and that these people, at the end of the day, were the ones who set up this charade.
Of course, if you come to that conclusion, you're probably right. So, but I insist, that happens at a geopolitical, geostrategic level. What does it teach you? I always go back to personal responsibility. What does it mean for you? Do you understand?
Great question. I haven't thought about it.
But what does it mean to you then? But I invite the listeners to ask themselves this question. What did the events of 2020 or even the economic crisis of 2008 mean to you, which was also a major geopolitical and geoeconomic event? For me, the biggest turning point was probably the fall of the Twin Towers.
So,
Of course, then, from there, a series of events begins, where an agenda with a goal is set in motion. But that's on the surface, that's in the script of the game.
yes, but who decides the script? It's the source.
Of course.
But why? I mean, I don't...
It's not the source, sorry Jota, it's not the source. It's the forces of evil that exist because they're created in an environment where good and evil have to exist, duality. So that we, here as players, are able to experience things that we wouldn't be able to experience in any other environment.
And the purpose of that experience?
What is it that the source gets to know itself?
What do you mean the source gets to know itself?
Yes, because the unique source is unaware of itself. It creates the illusion of standing before a mirror, generating a duality where it appears there are two, but really there's only one, looking at itself. That's the concept of a hologram. So that the source can experience itself in different facets that are still unknown to it. To develop its own potentials, it has to do it under the illusion of division. In reality, unity is not divisible. It seems like it is divisible, but it is not divisible. It is indivisible. Because it stands in front of a mirror, and when it stands in front of a mirror, then it seems like there are two. And if now you put another mirror in front of that mirror, it seems like there are three. And so on and so on. We are in the hall of mirrors. You are divinity, I am divinity, they are divinity. If we have the ability to go to the Father who dwells within us, we will have the ability to have that strength to understand that we are in training. And this will give us the key to be able to live all the events of our life from a perspective that is just that simple and yet not easy at all.